Hey everybody, we're going to go over a short PDF of the environment and the tools in the web because it's an important thing to think about just as we're getting started, a little bit of history of where this all came from and how we got there to a thing that we use every day. Okay, first is the environment, like what is the internet? Uh, is it a network of networks? In a way, but it's not only limited to that. It's not limited to web pages, just kind of things that we look at in a browser. It's all around us, and actually, in a lot of ways, it's moving closer and closer to us by coming into our home with things like Amazon Echo, um, whatever Apple's making and whatever any other company is making that is meant to improve your life. Um, we think of those things now as like a recording or listening device, but it's really just, it is listening, but it's collecting information, trying to make our lives better. So, examples that use the internet without the web, those could be email, uh, things that you can get to your phone, like instant messaging, apps on your phone. They are using a network of computers, but they're not necessarily using the web as we think about it, like using Chrome or Firefox or Edge or Outlook. So the birth of the internet is started a long time ago, not too long really though. 1958, the U.S. Department of Defense founded the Advanced Research Projects Agency, ARPA. A lot of us think of the military or the Department of Defense as just being about like guns and tanks and planes. But really, a lot of the technology that we use, like consumer technology, comes from the Department of Defense funding technology that they may or may not use. But in this case, they used it and we used it. First, they used it as like a network, mainframe of computers that would go up and running in case of like a nuclear holocaust or nuclear war, so they could keep in contact with each other. It turned out that never happened, but scientists who were using it, who weren't like necessarily military, kept using it, and eventually it spread to us. So things that may seem, like they're being to be used for nefarious purposes eventually uh, come to consumer technology and make our life better. So it's really funded in universities and in research. The environment, the world, the World Wide Web. The web uses an HTTP protocol. It's one of the many languages spoken over the internet. It's used to transmit data. The www uses browsers for transmitting, over the internet, in this case by entering a string of characteristics called a Uniform Resource Locator, or a URL, or a web address. So who made all of that? The idea came from a guy called Vannevar Bush. He created this thing called the Memex. It was never built, but it was published in a Atlantic Monthly. He was a research scientist for the military. There's the military again. And it was this idea of creating a desk where things are linked together. They're a library, and it could display books and films, and allow all this stuff to be cross-referenced and connected with one another somehow. He never explained how it would work, but it was this idea of like a desktop model of people sitting at a desk and scrolling through many documents and maybe even passing on those documents to someone else. So that inspired a lot of people, inspired a lot of research scientists who read that article and was talked about in universities, and they're like, oh, hey, that sounds pretty cool. The idea of hypertext, of text being linked together, creating like a vast network of links that you could go back and forth for, came from a scientist, Ted Nelson, who had this kind of competing project called Xanadu, where his idea was much different than what we use now, the www dot, the HTML. So it was a very much different idea, but the main idea was that he had this idea of creating links between text. Tim Berners-Lee is the guy that we can thank for the modern day internet. He created the World Wide Web in 1989, and his team invented the original HTTP along with the HTML, so the language that we're going to learn, and all the technology that would make it happen. Kind of the the grandfather of everything we're going to do in this course. How the web works? Well, it's a bunch of computers that are hooked together. They have server software on them that allow them to communicate with other computers. And the idea is that you type in something into your computer, goes up into a cloud, web server. That web server grabs whatever's been loaded onto it in terms of like whatever kind of service they're using, and they grab those documents and shoot them up and go back to you. And it's as quick as possible. The domain names and IP addresses. Each computer on the internet is assigned its unique IP address. Okay? So each computer that's hooked up to the internet has a little crazy number address that talks to all those computers on the server. Okay? The servers do the serving, but who is asking the questions? The client asks the questions. On the web, the browser is the client software that makes the request for the documents, and the server then returns those documents for the browser to display. Web page addresses. This is something we'll talk about a lot more later. At HVCC, you have your own URL, and that's going to be how we're handing in our projects. We're going to be uploading our projects to the server. Not the first one, but everything after that we will be using. Parts of the URL, the HTTP, and not totally important, not like critical to know, but it's good to know the parts of what all that address makes up. First there, you can see the protocol. 2 would be the name of the site. And then 3 would be like the absolute path. So whatever page you're locating in their web server. So if you kind of like look around, you can see exactly where you are by looking at that absolute path. And it's all separated mostly by that /. Anything after the .com is a /. Parts of the URL. I'm not going to go over that. Going to keep going. Markup languages for structure. So the first thing that we're going to learn is HTML. Markup language is a coding system that uses tags to provide instructions about the appearance, structure, and formatting of a document. So the HTML that we're going to learn first provides the structure. stands for Hypertext Markup Language. The current standard is HTML5, but if you ever need to check that for any reason, you can check caniuse.com. HTML on the page uses a predefined code called HTML tags to define the format and organization of the web page. So for example, opening and closing of the entire page would be the HTML, and then the closing HTML. There are lists that you can create, like a list item. Also, there's the H1, that would be heading 1. Okay, so those are some basic tags that we'll be talking about much more in depth as we go on. That's kind of what they look like. Structure of the page. So the web page is created, by a closing HTML tag and, not a closing, but an opening HTML tag and a closing HTML tag. Okay, so there's two tags that are saying like, hey, web browser, I'm using HTML. That's also said by this tag up here. You can notice that that doesn't have a closing HTML tag. Oops, there, save as. Next is the head tag right here, and that closes right here. Okay, so that's just saying this is the top part, this is the head. The title goes in the head. Okay, the title tag is actually what appears in the tab on the browser. So whatever you want that browser tab to say. Okay, so if it was like Gap or whatever, Banana Republic, I don't know, any Yahoo, Facebook, you could say Facebook, it would go up there. The next is the body tag, and that closes down here, and all the content. So like anything that happens on the page, like the stuff, like paragraphs, images, lists, videos, audio, all of that goes in the body tag. We'll be talking about that more as we go on. CSS is the design of the page. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. And what that is that's like whatever you want it to look like, okay? It could be like the type of font you're using, the spacing, which is determined by margins and padding, positioning, which is an element like we'll get into way later, but that's like if you want something in a very specific spot. And next would be like a background color or any kind of color at all. So like anything that's like making the page have any appearance is CSS, okay? And you use the HTML tags to target it. So if you want something to be like blue, you would say like make all paragraphs blue in a way. So CSS on the page would look like this up here. Okay, where it says body, it's got the squiggles. It says background color, BB3133, whatever that is, I forget. Okay, and that's wrapped in a style tag, which is right here, and you can see that that goes in the head tag. That goes in the top. So you got like the top and the bottom. So the head is the top, the body is the bottom. Okay? So whatever you want the page to look like goes in the top in a style tag. Scripting languages, we'll get into this much later, but these are short programs that essentially make anything like really cool happen on a web page. So when you see something like that's just kind of going nuts on the page, like things are moving, things are whatever, skirting around, those are scripting languages that run short programs that make your web page seem like way more interactive than it probably is. Example of those would be like JavaScript, or jQuery, or Bootstrap. Okay, so those are little short languages that run on a page. Here's jQuery here. jQuery is like shorthand for a JavaScript library. It takes a lot of common tasks that require a lot of JavaScript and wraps them into a short single line of code. Sorry about that. Very efficient. Looking for jQuery, you would mostly find it in the head. It can move around, but that's kind of where it would be. So like where things look like really kind of crazy, like this kind of stuff would be there. We'll do a little bit of jQuery, not a lot. Location, location, location. Okay. HTML is the opening tag, closing tag. And you have head tag, closing head tag. CSS would go right up there. Body tag, HTML goes in between those. And the two shall never mix. Okay? So that's the kind of the breakdown, the basics of where things go on a page. Here's a little summary. Yeah, there's the but. But jQuery can be sometimes found down there. So that can wander. What does it look like? Again, CSS is wrapped in a style tag. jQuery is wrapped in a script. HTML is between the body tags. HTML has its own set of all the little tags. All right, so that is it. Just a quick kind of run through of some basics that appear on a web page, how the web works, where it came from, and how we got there. Okay, thank you.